Okay. Hey, everybody. This is Silver Spook, and I'm super happy to be here with an amazing artist, game developer, creator. I'm a big fan of all of Ben's work. Ben Chandler, artist on Technobabylon, a whole host of games, Old Skies, Nighthawks, Unavowed, long list of amazing games. I apologize. I've talked to various of the Wadget Eye team. It's a grave oversight that I have not done a podcast with you. But anyway, thanks so much for being on, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice to be here, and it's fine. I tend to keep to myself most of the time, but I'm always happy to talk.
Yeah. I don't know where to start. There's lots of places to start. One thing I think is probably good to say right now is Gilt is a new game that Ben is working on, and Wadget Eye Games is going to be publishing. I'm really impressed by everything I've seen of it so far. Obviously, it's still in
Thank you.
development. Yeah, it's just amazing things you've done with Adventure Game Studio. I mean, as someone who also works in it, I know how tricky it can be to make things happen in that engine. So yeah.
Especially being an art man for over a decade and sort of focusing only on that, going back to writing code and doing the design and the writing, and that is interesting. I had to sort of relearn how to write code and everything, but it all comes back eventually.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to kind of just talk a little bit about where you can start wherever you want. I'd be interested to hear about like where the idea came from, the art style, like yeah, anywhere. I'm really intrigued by the science fantasy world.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Guilt is kind of a really old idea, more than a decade, maybe 15 years, I think. It's been sort of kicking around my head. Um, but I never quite knew what to do with it. And you're a creator, so you must have plenty of ideas kicking around the head, and you're always, which one should I make next? Or which one will I get the opportunity to make? And they sort of present themselves at a time and tell you that this is the one to make. In Gilt's case, I read The Solar Cycle by Gene Wolfe, which is science fantasy. And it just kind of, I don't know, there's something about his writing that really appeals to me, and it felt like the right time to make this idea. Um, and especially the world we live in at the moment, where obviously it's a very strange. I mean, everybody in history has lived through interesting times. There's always been drama going on, but if we look at our own dramas right now with the way the internet is and the way world politics is and all of those sort of things, there's um, a lot of elements that made me go, oh, this is probably the game that I should make right now. It's a lot of questions about belief and about what is real and what isn't real. And I don't want to say it's deeply philosophical because I haven't studied philosophy, but it has, it's the game that said, oh, this is the one I need to make. And also having it like finally a chance to develop another game of my own rather than just being the sideman on art is nice. So I've been waiting for that chance for a while. So I took the opportunity with both hands when we finished Old Skies and said, all right, Dave, it's my turn. Let me make something. So yeah, I wrote a pitch document up, which was kind of very intimidating, but it helped me it forced me to shape my ideas. And the premise of the game is that you're haunted by a dying god in a world that used to be very important and now no longer is. And, obviously we are interested in adventure games, so thoughts of obsolescence and thoughts of that sort of stuff come through. But people look at it and they say, oh, I see Dune in this, I see Loom in this, I see The Dig in this, and there's little bits of that in all of it. So, but mostly it's just 15 years of ideas kicking around my head, built up, coming along to say, hey, this is the game you should make.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess I had some of those thoughts, but I was just I think for me I was thinking about science fantasy because I just wrapped the game and I was watching like old the heavy metal movies and like random like science fantasy movies and like reading some things, just thinking about possible future games. And I was like, oh yeah, that's I was playing this these like action platformers. It's like Valfaris. It's like a side scrolling platformer, but really cool. I don't know if you heard of
Oh
that
yeah,
one.
I know Valfaris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, we're both at least musicians of some kind, and I'm a fan of like various kinds of rock, alt, and metal music, and I like the aesthetic, and it just I think it's probably just coincidental that I played it around the same time as I saw some of the promotional material for Gilt, and I was just like, that would be like a really cool, really fun world to explore, just that kind of genre that you're talking about, and I really like the concept of like it's you're kind of in a dying, what was it? I forget the exact description. You kind of, I think you alluded to it. It's kind of like it was once the center of great economic activity, prosperity in the galaxy. And now it's not doing so well. And I think a lot of people are, like you kind of said, it echoes a lot of aspects of our lives, and feelings of obsolescence. So all that sounds really cool, really interesting. I think it'd be, you may not have a PhD in philosophy, but I feel like everybody has something to say when it comes to considering our world and our reality. But yeah.
I have obviously Dune has been very much on people's minds lately, and I read the Dune books a few years back, and I've always been kind of interested in the aesthetic. You mentioned the heavy metal comics, and obviously Mobius did some work in that Dune universe, and I think obviously Cryo. I think I've been talking a lot lately with people about like 90s French adventure games, which really draws from that heavy metal comics theme. Um, and yeah, I thought it's one of those things where, living in Australia is obviously a colony of the British Empire, and the importance of the British Empire has changed over the years. And reading Dune, you have this world that is kind of the center of the universe because of its resources. And that feels a lot like colonialism. And obviously, the book covers that quite a bit, and they talk about the propaganda and everything. And I thought to myself, well, what if you had a world like that when all of a sudden the asset, the resource, let's say coal or whatever, was suddenly no longer important? What happens to that world that was once a superpower? What happens to that society and the people that are left behind? Because a world doesn't stop being important to itself just because economics no longer cares about it. That world still has relevance and currency to itself. So that's part of the exploration. And yeah, obviously, music is part of my life. I'm a gigging musician, so just before our call, I was getting ready for my gig tomorrow night. I've got a few new songs to learn. I've actually recorded some what you might call heavy metal, maybe just hard rock guitar for Gilt so far. I had to tune my baritone guitar down to drop A in order to play it. So
Wow.
Thomas, my composer, is a keyboard player, so he doesn't know how to compose for guitar in terms of keys. He just wrote whatever. I'm like, I've got the baritone guitar, I can tune down. But I was like, this is pretty heavy, dude. I like it. It's good, but yeah. It kind of I listened to a lot of heavy metal when I was a teenager, obviously, and being a guitarist, you want the guys that can play the fastest when you're a teenager. So that was the stuff, and it's cool to play some guitar on a games track as well. But I haven't done that actually.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, to be honest, like that, you're kind of mentioning playing a lot of rock guitar, playing guitar. That was like a lot of my junior high and high school. I was like a hermit, isolate. I just like sat in my room. I was one of those weird people from like I just watched Heavier Trip and Heavy Trip, and I was like, I was that weird music nerd that's like sitting there. Everyone else is like trying to get laid, playing big shows, and I'm just like, no, we have to figure out the perfect arpeggio to put right. And I had a very unusual guitar teacher too, who was like he looked like, that was my first entry to becoming like that was like my baby goth awakening, where my guitar teacher was like the King Diamond, like the all the Michelangelo Badio was everywhere, and like I went to like Catholic school, and this guy was like, he's gonna eat my soul, and he was like playing all this super fast speed demonic metal, and like I was like introduced at somewhere around high school, and I just spent a lot of time. Actually, so anyway, long story short, I was a music, alt rock, and I was into all like the Smashing Pumpkins, the '90s alternative rock, but also into like metal too. And I always liked before I got into writing and music and art, because I do like this kind of solo dev thing that's kind of a lot. But I was actually first thing I was into was music. So anyway, it's not about me. This is about I really like the your get up. You have a really cool get up. I heard you got some comments on your feet, possibly unwanted, and you did disco expression. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange world out there now, and you know what people say to you after they've had a few drinks at a gig is yeah is nothing to do with anything. But I also think like talking about like being that sort of hermit that sits at home and like, oh, what's the right bit of music to put here, or the right arpeggio, or you know, especially as a guitarist, a lot of it is economics of picking what's the most efficient way of doing this, and it's quite nerdy and not very cool. But it's very similar to indie game development, where a lot of the times it's just you by yourself for a long time trying to get the idea right, and then all of a sudden you put it in front of people and you're like, oh, I hope this works. You know, it's a bit easier with music because you go out on a Saturday night and try it, and you know you find out pretty quickly from the audience response if it's good or not. But games, kind of a longer burn to figure out if you got something good. But you know, but I think that's all performance, all creativity, all um, anything like that. You know, and I think like you talk about alt rock, Smashing Pumpkins, that sort of stuff. If you grew up in the '90s, that stuff was unavoidable. Like just like adventure games, you know, it all comes from that same place. So we probably have very similar influences, which is what leads you to making a cyberpunk adventure game in 2026.
No, no, absolutely, yeah. It's definitely if you grew up if you're between 35 and 45, and you had certain game experience, you probably had similar younger game experiences, and then the Mario, the Sonic the Hedgehog, and then the adventure games, and then the Doom was played at some point, I'm sure. In college, it was some. I know we're both fans of Deus Ex. I know that. I saw you just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a similar kind of experience, and that yeah, kind of creates a certain there's gonna be a lot of indie game creators and just creators in general, but certainly indie game creators that like there's a kind of that set of kind of cultural history that's like the grist for the mill. I feel like it's sometimes I'm worried, like, is this kind of like is this appropriate reference to make? I'll talk about Terminator or something from Doom, and I'm like, is this kind of just kind of crass? But then everybody really seems, a lot of people who play indie adventure games and the kind of games that we both make, and it seems to like resonate. I feel that's the kind of sense that I get, and yeah. Anyways, so I feel like that's you mentioned like nerding out about the music. That I spent a lot of time doing that. I was just interested, like what I mentioned, Pumpkins and a couple, like some metal bands, but like what was your I don't know, formative like musical, or some of your favorite bands, I guess, favorite bands.
Oh well, I mean, a lot of it started. You mentioned Doom, and if you think about '90s adventure games, I mean, Doom has a pretty heavy metal soundtrack. I remember playing Command and Conquer Red Alert, and you've got this amazing music. So I think kind of the games had the music baked in at the time, and there was nothing better than in the late '90s playing Carmageddon while listening to Metallica or Prodigy or all that sort of stuff. It was. I think a lot of '90s kids had that same thing, and it was just, I think, the internet specifically. I live in a very remote part of the world, so there's not a lot of resources, but the internet became a gateway to me to find communities, but also to find learning resources. So I couldn't walk down to the library because I don't live anywhere near a library, but I could go on the internet. And the internet became an encyclopedia. It became a community of creators. So in the same way that I would go to like the local gathering of musicians every month and we talk about stuff and compare ideas, you would log on to a forum and talk about stuff and compare ideas, and that's where you did all your learning. I didn't have the drive to go to university. I didn't have the money. University is very expensive, and you know, nobody had them. Well, no one around me had the money to do that sort of thing. So I just thought, well, I guess I'll see if I can do it by myself. But In terms of musical influences, it's very, very broad ranging. As tends to happen when you're a gigging musician, you end up listening to a lot of different stuff. So one day I'll be practicing heavy metal, one day I'll be practicing reggae, one day I'll be practicing jazz. But when I was first making adventure games, it was definitely alt rock, it was heavy metal, it was a lot of, Devin Townsend was a very big influence on me. I loved his stuff. I listened to a lot of Smashing Pumpkins growing up, and then lots of Australian bands, lots of local Australian bands. Shout out to Carnival, who are still going. They just released a new album. Shout out to Butterfly Effect, that reformed a few years ago. Yeah, good nights. Listening to those albums over and over, going to go see those bands play. And back in those days, it was like a 6-hour drive for me to go and see bands play. It was, yeah, it was. But you're a young musician, you sleep in the back of the car. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Not that different to being indie dev, where you just make do with what you got.
Yeah. That's yeah. Definitely. I'm just I don't. Yeah. Every single thing you said, I could probably relate to most of that. I gotta go look up Butterfly Effect. Make sure we gotta re up my Australian
Oh,
rappers game.
yeah.
um. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I guess you kind of mentioned that it was you're from like Western Australia, I think, and
Yeah.
you're kind of remote. So I would get maybe you could talk a little bit more about like that experience growing up because obviously some other Wild Jedi members like Dave is obviously like deeply New Yorkian, definitely New Yorker, like from the city,
Yeah.
as I understand, and I guess how do you feel like and you maybe to dovetail it into you don't have to, but like do you feel like there's a particular story you really wanted to tell that's something to do with the kind of a little more remote experience, or you want to just talk about more about how that impacts your games or your music growing up?
I think for me, I like to have a lot of space to do thinking. I'm not very good at multitasking. I'm quite bad at focusing on more than one thing at once. So I live in a part of the world where I can go for a walk and there's just nothing. So there's no houses, there's no cars, there's no people. It's just dirt and sky and trees. So for me, that's very useful. A lot of my development gets done walking and just letting all the stuff percolate in the back of my mind. But in the old days, when I was making freeware games and just trying to figure out, do I want to be a game creator? Do I have ideas worth making in games? I was working on sheep farms, so I'd go out and I'd be doing fairly repetitive work all day, which didn't require much use of my mind. So my mind would sort of be developing ideas as I was working. And that was kind of the writing process for me, I guess, back then, all the design processes. You'd be just sort of doing fairly menial work, which required muscles but not brains. And so my brain was doing all that. And yeah, I wonder if I had had the distractions of being in a big city, would I have become a developer? I would have probably pushed the music harder than I do now. I might have become a musician more than a game developer. Because I definitely liked playing music more than I like making games, but I like playing games more than I like listening to music, if that makes sense. It's a strange sort of dichotomy. But yeah, I think even now, like when I was trying to write Gilt, I sort of had 6 weeks to nail down a design dog. And I would just go walking all the time with a notebook in my pocket. And even if I'm not thinking about the idea, it's obviously stewing in the back of your head. I mean, I think every creative knows what it's like to be cooking in the kitchen or having a shower or doing something around the house, taking the trash out, and an idea pops in your head. You're like, oh, that's the thing I need. So I just go walking. One thing about living in Western Australia, it's either too hot or nice weather. So it'll be the middle of winter and it's still sun shining and no snow or anything. So and definitely not the rainfall that you get in other parts of the world. So most of the time I can go for a walk and just sort things out in my head. So I guess if there's anything I can say that impacted me from being out here, it would be that. But also I tend to, it's not that I don't like drawing cities, but I feel like I've drawn enough for a while and like it's nice to draw something different. I remember Cameron Kunzelman wrote a nice piece about Unavowed where he talked about the big open skies and everything, and how he grew up in a place with lots of big open skies. I was like, yeah, that's what I see every day. Every day I see the best sunset you've ever seen in your life. Like, so that definitely, I love drawing nature probably more than I like drawing cities. And I know that you probably um, are mostly familiar with me from my cyberpunk work. And like to do cyberpunk well, I had to go watch Ghost in the Shell. I had to go, I read Neuromancer. I watched The Matrix again because I'd already seen it, and just tried to understand the vibe of cyberpunk. Obviously, my love of Deus Ex and those sort of games fed in to that. But that cities don't come naturally to me. I feel like an outsider when I'm in the city. So, Dave would always send me when I worked on Blackwell and Unavowed, would send me photo references of places and lots of information. But when I visited and he took me on a tour of all the places I've drawn, I was like, oh, this is nothing like what I thought I was drawing. This is totally different. For some reason, I don't get a good image of places, even when using the Google Street View or anything like that. I just, buildings are very foreign to me. I like trees and clouds and rocks and stuff. So I think that's why I like science fantasy, because a lot of those worlds are as much about the ecology as they are about the civilized society or the urban society. You look at a lot of science fiction and you have like the sprawling megacities, but you also have like, oh, there's a weird planet with insert whatever the creators have done. So yeah, I tend to go for the weird planet with cool biology and cool, I guess, geology.
Yeah, I just had, I can definitely see that. Weirdly, because obviously, we're both from the Pacific Ocean, but I'm, from Hawaii, so, and it's kind of weird because some people ask me that, they're like, "What? You're from Hawaii? Why don't you make games with like coconuts and palm trees and the white sand beach?" No, I put in my trench coat and it's like midnight all the time, and I'm wearing the shades, and there's neon. My vision is augmented at all times. And like, what? But what about the
Oh,
coke?
right.
What about the surfing and the dolphins though? Like, stop talking about the dolphins.
I
But
mean, I think you can come from a place. We're all products of our environment, but that might not necessarily be the thing that you're looking to express. So, and I think if you do dystopian society and see the coconuts as well, people might get focused on the coconuts and miss the subtext. So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's basically exactly it. I was like, like, I guess, yeah, it's kind of odd because funny thing is, actually, I grew up. I was basically my house when I was growing up was like in a rainforest. I still live around like there's this banyan tree right outside. I can look outside and there's like ferns, and we have this like we're growing food all over here. Sweet potato vines are everywhere. There's pigs and dogs, and and so and but also like it's just kind of the way that these are small islands, and we're right next to this. I grew up right next to this huge city, so it's kind of a weird. And I went to a very like I'm from kind of like a poorer area, like poorer valley, but went to this like upscale private school basically just because my parents taught there. So that the cyberpunk that kind of deals with the high tech, low life, and like the social economic inequality. That's what I kind of focus on. Is partially kind of having that my specific kind of weird upbringing. But anyway, but throwing it back to where like I definitely get what you mean about like how like you want to you drew because you do an amazing job obviously drawing these cities, and I would have swore you were like
Thank you.
from LA or New York or something because it's amazing. I mean, like it definitely. I mean, Technobabylon and these games. I was like that's part of what like I told Dave and I told James Dearden. Like that's I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna try this adventure game studio engine because of like this incredible cyberpunk indie game called Technobabylon among some of the other ones.
Thank you.
So I was like I would never know that you like live out there, you love the trees and the rocks and so I think I kind of relate to that because like in the my more recent games I'm trying to Neophyte 2 definitely I'm trying to like have there's like kind of city super mega city world, and then you kind of exit that later on, and it's you kind of go to a different place where it's more solar punk. There's more plants and trees. And I remember like looking out the window and like really looking at plants one day, and I was like, it's weird how plants have just like where is this blue tint coming? And I just like I got obsessed with that. I was like, why do leaves look blue? And I was like, I eventually realized it's because the blue sky in Hawaii, and it was reflecting off the plants. And I just drew all these green scrapers, and anyway, so yeah, it's interesting.
I have a lot of feelings about how plants are colored in artwork a lot of the times by like less experienced artists, and when you finally learn to look at the colors and you're not just going, oh, trees, the trunk's brown and the leaves are green. I feel like, if you take a photo of a leaf and put it into Photoshop and use the eyedropper tool at the different parts of the leaf, you fairly quickly find out that a lot of it isn't green and a lot of the trunk isn't brown. But I also think, like, throwing back to coming to cyberpunk from a less urban upbringing, I think sometimes looking in from the outside helps you hold up a mirror to be like, hey, this is what you're not seeing that I see. That's very strange. But also working on Technobabylon and going to read Neuromancer, Neuromancer pretends, I guess, to be about, like, from the outside, you might think it's like, oh, it's all neon lights and that sort of stuff. But actually, a lot of the parts that we see are quite squalid and quite, they're not really that nice. And, the person that we deal with is very much an outsider. So I think, well, I mean, he's very specifically an outsider. That's the whole plot of the book, is he's trying to get back in, and this is his thing, and now he's stuck. So I think it kind of makes sense, because I had mostly been familiar with Ghost in the Shell and Deus Ex. They're definitely more like, oh, this is a government agent that is government funded, and they're very much part of the system. But Neuromancer, which is, I guess we might call it one of the texts of the genre. I guess Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is in there as well. But everyone in that book's an outsider. But yeah, I think being an outsider actually helps you point out some of the idiosyncrasies that people within the system might not notice or might have grown comfortable with. So I think it's fairly natural to comment on parts of the world that you're not part of but visit.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to Neuromancer, because that's it's funny because me, and my partner, Holly, we actually we met on the William Gibson message board, and we basically met physically at a meetup with William Gibson, and like one of the first podcasts was with him, and so it's weird. I'm like it's too wrapped up in my entire weird history. This unusual kid from Hawaii that just like hangs out with William Gibson, and it's like he's a very nice guy. He's also has an out, but you kind of mentioned outsider, and I think part of the cyberpunk, and I would say Neuromancer is cyberpunk was, I think, coined by Bruce Bethke to cyber, which is a very hot tech and computer technology term, and then punk kind of was like the youth rebellion and the punk music, and they kind of put it together, hopefully to increase the probability of publishers picking up his book. And I got this new cyberpunk, and it's I know Will Gibson himself is kind of like not he has like feelings about it. He's not he kind of is always trying to like he's I'm always perpetually trying to debunk my marketing about that and try to get people to stop asking me to write Neuromancer 2. But it's but his thing also has been like kind of ostracized in like growing up in school. He was always kind of a weirdo. Couldn't like figure out the fashion thing, and some of like the very very specific like descriptions, like it was a Ono Sendai Cyberspace 7. It was a 7-function force feedback manipulator. That kind of like cyberpunk. The way he writes, which is I love it obviously, but it's part of it. He's kind of the way he kind of describes it is kind of like almost like trying to prove that I can be accepted by the cool, fashionable society. And also he was a boomer. He says he was a baby boomer generation writer amongst a lot of Gen Xers, and he felt kind of gapped, right? That's another kind of factor. I was thinking about reflecting on that outsider comment. But anyway, yeah. So cyberpunk, it's definitely a genre that's it's interesting. It's an interesting genre. I personally like it because of the punk, the in the I very like I like to try to push the needle on things. Or Silver Spoon Games, of course, make not apolitical games. Let's say that, put it that way. So I like to kind of push the punk edge of it. I like the cyber, kind of like you're saying. Like some people just kind of see the neon and it's very pretty and it's like cotton candy color Tokyo skyline. But I kind of I'm not like I don't I don't when I think about it, I think of Neuromancer, right? Which you kind of said it's not
Right.
like Night City in Neuromancer is not a very nice place to be. Like it's kind of miserable. And all that kind of gets like lost in this kind of like history of this like kind of like the zeitgeist and like how it's expanded. It's become like mainstream certainly in the last like 10 years, right? Since
Yeah, I think people see the fashion and they see the style and they think, oh, that's cool. I think it's easy to look at the simulated parts of, let's say, the Matrix and say, oh, that's the part of the Matrix, and not the part when they're in the hovercraft. I think the Nebuchadnezzar, and they're like living in squalor, which is the reality of their situation. I think for me, one of the very first cyberpunk experiences I had was called Nightlong, which is a not very well remembered adventure game by, I think, Team 17, or Acclaim, or one of those English companies, or at least published by them. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. But then I very quickly, in '99, I guess it was, played, I think it was a demo of Omicron the Nomad Soul. It might have been 2000, somewhere around that time. And Omicron has, David Bowie showing up as a guy, and it has this amazing intro, and it feels like it's going to be a really deep, rich world. You can walk around a supermarket, and there's a lot of attention paid to the detail of the world. I think the facade drops fairly quickly once you start trying to play it as a game. But for me, just like the experience of wandering around the world, there was this promise of something more. It's kind of spiritual in a lot of ways, which I think cyberpunk is. I was only thinking about that sort of the Rasta elements in Neuromancer last night, actually, which is very strange that we're talking about this now. But I was listening to some Bob Marley and thinking about how Gibson put Rasta in there. I thought he's actually quite spiritual in that book, and I guess cyberpunk. I mean, Deus Ex is full of philosophy and theology. It's full of it. We have um, even
right in the
even
title.
yeah, and what's his name? I forget his name. He I can't believe I've forgotten his name. But anyway, he references Thomas Aquinas at the very start in the introduction, and you kind of have this thing where Aquinas would be horrified at what this man is doing, but you can use I guess theology to justify anything if you're part of the corporation. But of course, we're getting very political now. But yeah, I think I think that is the part that fascinates me, the idea that there's this depth to it. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by the lights and the cool style, the David Bowie and the interesting world. But as I grew up and took a look at the world around me and thought, I hope that I leave this world a little bit better than how it was when I found it. And it can be very hard to believe you're doing that when you're making indie adventure games. Um, can be very hard to believe that anything I'm doing has an impact on the world or makes anyone's work better. But I guess that's the hope. That's why anyone creates anything, is because there's something inside them that they want to express it for whatever reason. And it was one of my school friends told me once. She's like, "Oh, I hope I leave this world better than I found it." I was like, "Oh, those are words to live by. Hmm, that's a good thought." So I guess for me, that was always more the thing. And it's funny because when I was working on Technobabylon 2, I would use Google image search to search reference images. And if ever I was like looking for cyberpunk apartment or something like that, Technobabylon is what would come up. And then, of course, Cyberpunk 2077 came along, and now nobody knows what Technobabylon is. And you Google cyberpunk apartment, you get one thing only, which is fun. It doesn't bother me, but playing that game, I'm not sure. if you've played that game, but I was like, this is an interesting way to approach the genre. It's human in ways that I wouldn't have expected, but also does things that isn't maybe how I would do it. So yeah.
Yeah. Like I know of yeah, I can't afford like the kind of rigs I would need to properly play these AAA games, but yeah, I mean I'm glad to hear your take on that. And I just want to say, if you ever feel like I don't know if I'm leaving the world a better place, if you feel like I mean, to the extent that we try to leave this, I don't know if Source Book Games is going to leave the world a better place. I also hope so. I hope that what we do there in various ways. But there wouldn't be a Neophyte if you hadn't made Technobabylon, and other games, like that. So I just want to say that like that has impact on me, at least creatively. Like I know I already said it once, but I just want to say it again. Just to
I'm glad to hear that. I think for me, and part of the message of Guilt is this, is you might not be able to change the world, but you can change someone's world, and that's part of it. If every day you're making someone's world a little bit better, or you're making your little part of the world a little bit better, you're changing the world. Even if you might not think that it all adds up, I think it does. I'm that's part of the uh, game that I'm writing, and also that I think the big accolades are a little bit overrated. A lot of the things that we might see as an achievement are kind of just a social construct that, you don't have to accomplish things to deserve fairness or to deserve to be here. You know, you are deserving of this, whether or not you have the big acclaim or the big awards or anything. But then I'm an indie guy, so maybe that's me projecting a little bit.
well, I definitely feel uh that's something I feel like the thing that we're talking about, there's definitely like a spiritual dimension that we talk about, Deus Ex, the God from the machine. uh that's something on a lot of people's minds, and you're also there's a lot of we're in a very like transitionary phase, certainly, in really everyone in the more developed and even in the less developed world, everyone is going through like a lot of transitions in various ways. So I think that the world you're describing, the guilt, the story, and like the concept, and I feel like the art is reflecting that, is like really relevant. I mean, I'm also considering those things. Like, what am I even doing? Like, I was just like talking. I was just listening to like it was actually an Australian Melbourne game meetup, and one of my friends who is he works in Australia, and he did this video about like it's kind of like it's what killed the game industry, I think is what the title of it was, and people were talking about like basically like how they feel about it's more about like how indie devs feel about the industry and like what is happening and like what are we even doing, right? Like what, yeah, like you said, it can kind of feel like what is I'm just like putting out these digital toys for people to play. But I do think that like it is art, it is like of course you could just make a crass money grubbing game that you don't put your heart in, or you use generative software and you don't really care, and just trying to make money. There's people like that. Most of them tend to try to work for the big. I feel like there's more of that in the bigger corporate world. In the indie world, like people are trying. I certainly feel like Wajidai and you and a lot of the indie devs. Some of us like burned out in like that bigger corporate world, and like I want to just do something. That's my experience. I worked at bigger game companies. I worked at like government and big game entities, and it was just like soul sucking, right? And so I was like, I'm done. I gotta go and try to make a Silver Spook. I'm trying to make the game I actually want to make, and put the messages out that I create the art and put the messages out that actually I would like to put out into the world, right? Before I become like 50 years old and just like going to fancy dinners and just wondering like why I didn't stop trying to like just programming for banks or something, wondering what if I had actually done something worth doing, right? And leaving a mark on doing something to make the world a better place over time, even if I can't see exactly how the butterfly effect, how it ripples out right into the world. So I feel like that's definitely, so I mean a game that's like kind of about that in a certain way, in a science fiction fantasy world is probably a good place to set it. And anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I definitely feel like that's there's a lot of indie game developers and just like people. I think that's where a lot of people are at. That's what I kind of gather, and people are like definitely worried,
Yeah.
right? They're like, what is going to happen? Like, can't will I be able to keep doing the things that I'm currently doing? And where am I gonna, I guess the word would be pivot, but it's kind of like I feel like people, in this time when there's a extreme amount of commodification, there's an extreme amount of like, it's just getting really gross in a lot of the industry. But at the same time, the industry is kind of collapsing, right? Like you kind of like that, like kind of like the picture of Gilt where the things are cracking, right, and falling apart, and people are trying to figure out like how are we gonna like sow the seeds of the future in the rubble, right? And so I feel like, sorry, just kind of I'm all over the place in this moment. Let me bring it
That's
back.
fun.
I guess it's I'm thinking about like Deus Ex and like how it was pivotal. I think one of the ways it was pivotal was because like that was one of the first games where I started to like question like what it is, because that's kind of like the theme of it, right? That in the cyberpunk ethos is like, what are we doing, right? What are we doing in this city? Like if you're working as a
Yeah.
government agent for this, we're fighting crime, and I remember that first conversation where it's like, with the Bob Page, of course, makes Thomas Aquinas
That's
reference.
the name. Yes.
Bob Page, and then you encounter the bad guy, right, in the Statue of Liberty, in the wreckage of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it's
Oh,
very
yes.
right. It's very poignant at the time. It came out before 2001, but it's kind of like he asked this question where it's like, you think you're right. You think you're the good guy, right, with the gun, running when you have augmented vision and you can like run as fast as a cheetah with your augmented legs, and you're like the goth Superman that dresses kind of like Blade, and you're really cool, huh? But actually, we're actually trying to get medicine to the people, and the corporations and entities that you are actually working for. I don't know if you know this or not, but you're not actually the good guy. And I remember like that was like a moment where I really started like considering a lot. That's why I think a lot of people, especially if you played it right around that late teens, early college age, I feel like that had a real impact on me. Like this thing, because not to say that other games like were like not intellectual, but it's kind of like that was one that really had a impact of like what are I doing? Because right, it kind of question like you're always the protagonist. You are the protagonist. Like you are the guy that's saving the world, and that game really made you ask like, am I saving the world, or do I need to kind of consider the world that I'm in, and where I'm working for, and the systems that I'm working for, and if I am actually the good guy or not. That was kind of like, and that was like the title, right? Was on the box was like question everything. I remember that was the marketing for it, and I feel like so today I feel like more people are kind of like asking that question that Cyberpunk and the Deus Ex kind of posed like more intensely, because it's like, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I know I've been all over the place. For
I
the last
feel
time.
like
Yeah.
I feel like sort of every generation of games kind of goes through that a little bit. If you look in the 1980s, you have games like A Mind Forever Voyaging and Portal, a computer novel, which is like sort of getting into that stuff in what you might think is a fairly rudimentary form of interaction, but they were doing it in the 90s. I think some of the JRPGs were getting into questioning politics and that sort of thing. For me, Planescape Torment is kind of the first time where I played a game where it was very overtly philosophical, and you're like, oh, these guys read a few books and they're interested in doing something. But there was probably part of that in Fallout. I just didn't pick up on it. And then, Deus Ex came along, Beyond Good and Evil. I feel like there might have been parts of it in Anachronox, but I was too busy having fun with the other parts of Anachronox. But yeah, I think that particular era, when we were probably very impressionable clay, is when these games were coming out, and we were probably picking up on them. Whereas if we had been coming to that time of our lives in the late 80s, we might have been playing Portal, a computer novel, or A Mind Forever Voyaging, and that might have been the spark that lit our fuse. In terms of the industry dying or changing, let's say, I tend to be, I think, probably one of the most optimistic people from everybody that I know, because I feel, I mean, it's always been hard to sell games. I promise you that. Like, it's always been hard. When I first decided that I'm gonna try and make games as a thing, there was literally no way of doing it from where I was. Um, so I thought, well, we'll see what happens, but there's no way I can make a living from this. Um, it's still really, really hard to have a hit. It's still really, really hard to get people to pay attention to you, but um, it's not impossible. Um, and there's no way of, I think there's no way of knowing what's going to be a hit, but that's always been true of music. It's always been true with books. It's always been true with films. There's a million great albums every year that nobody ever hears. There's a million great books that no one ever reads. And we talked before about like changing the world and leaving a legacy and everything. And oh, is this important? But if you think how long ago the Odyssey was created, like written, or the Iliad, you can still be moved by that today if you read the Odyssey today. You can still find it very moving. And you might also find, the pyramids very moving. And if you think about what the pyramids were, which was sort of monuments to wealth and power and kind of the very apex, they were probably the Elon Musks of their time who like, oh, I want to be the first man to go to Mars or like send a mission to Mars sort of thing. I want to leave my footprint in this sand of time. But you can still be moved by the pyramids, even though like or moved by the Great Wall. So there's no telling what will move people. It can be the outcome of many people suffering, or the outcome of one people suffering, which is being a creative person and suffering for months just to have things people can play. But I think the hard part as a game developer specifically is I think games are the most susceptible to time. A game that is 4 years old is an old game, whereas a film that's 4 years old is finally getting its Blu-ray release or whatever, and it's hard. People still talk about films from the 1940s or from earlier all the time. Um, you know, one of my favorites is Casablanca, and you watch Casablanca today, and it's fantastic, phenomenal film. It's hard to imagine anybody playing a game from 80 years ago at some point in the future and being like, "Oh, this is the text. This is still really relevant." Because I think games are kind of, I think they age more quickly, and that's something I'm always like, if I had written a book, if what year was Neuromancer released? It was like early 80s sometime.
80, 82, 84, yeah.
Right. It's hard to imagine us having the conversation that we had about Neuromancer about a video game related, like released at that time. About a Pong or Space Invader style game from that time. Even though, like, I still play text adventures and love them and find them quite inspirational. Neuromancer has a much bigger spread today. There are way more people have read Neuromancer than have played a game from that year. Way, way more people. So it's hard to think like, oh, is this, even though video games are now a very popular medium, the video games that the area we're interested in, the area that we're working in, it's hard to feel like there's a reach there. But obviously, like the fact that we're having this discussion, there is obviously some reach, and it's not like, oh, no one's paying attention to me. It's always just like, oh, I'm curious. Will anybody care about the work that I'm doing in 10 years' time? But then a writer might have that. There's a there's a great I think it was a W.B. Yeats poem where he talks about his friend finishing a book that was his last work and nobody cares about it. I was like, oh, that's I should look that poem up because it made me very happy. And I have friends who release games that took off and like changed their lives, and I have friends that release games that three people bought. Both of those things can sort of happen. People talk about an indie bubble, but there's still indie mega hits today. And you go back to the times when people talk about, oh, this was the indie bubble, and there were still indie games that were selling, fewer than 1,000 copies at that time. So and the Kickstarter bubble, there were still Kickstarter projects that didn't make it. There's trends and there's patterns. It's always hard. It will always be hard. For some people will get fortunate, some people won't. That's just business. And that's just the creative world, I think. Unfortunately, there's no magic solution to it. You just got to make what's in your heart and hope it's enough. And, you know, I wish that there was a way to give everybody optimism about it. There's not. Like I said, some of my favorite bands are bands that I saw play live and they were phenomenal and no one will ever hear of them. And that's just how it is.
Yeah, that is just how it is. It's kind of like you gotta, that it is philosophical and it's spiritual in that sense of like, what are you creating for? Like, are you creating so that 8 billion people know you and you'll live forever? And in 4200 AD, a science fictional civilization will bring your works to the galactic Silk Road, and you'll be and then some heavy metal 2000 civilization will still be playing your music. I mean, if that's what you need, I mean, you're gonna be dead already. So I mean, don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I definitely think that's that's something that people.
But also, I think like as like a live musician, last weekend I went out and there was a joint 21st birthday party, and I played at the 21st birthday party. Had a great night. The crowd had a great time. It was a really good night. The crowd got rowdy enough that I had to like calm them down. Like, hey, you're unplugging your speakers with my dancing. Like, let's all just calm down for a second. Let me plug everything back in. We start the show up again. Those kids, because I'm old enough now that 21-year-olds are kids to me. Those kids will probably never see me play again. Those kids will probably they're not interested in anything else that I do with my career, but for like one night of their lives, we celebrated together, and that's kind of why I like live music. Because it might be just you and 100 people and that's it. And it's only, if you think like, if you made a game and only 100 people play it, it'd be kind of devastating, right? But it does happen. But if you connected with them, then that's a great thing, and I love that experience of going out and, helping people celebrate their wedding or helping people celebrate their birthday or just playing at a bar and people are out for the night and they're just celebrating being alive. And I think part of being a creative person making games, and cyberpunk ultimately is a celebration, I hope, of life, because even though everything's artificial intelligence and super high tech, none of that matters without the human element. So I tend to be a little bit philosophical about how much, maybe I only affected 100 people's lives, but that's enough and that's important to me. So that's probably more important than any award I can name or any sort of, any life accomplishment of, you earned this much money or you got featured in this magazine or anything like that. The fact that you helped, that you were part of people's lives, I think is the most important part to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's to me, that's definitely it. I was, it's because there can be a tendency to kind of want to just like look at the line going up, whether that's a Steam wish list, your bank account, number of awards, how many accolades, and yeah, that's definitely not what is in the long run going to, I think, really matter. It's like, how many people did you touch? Like, how many people, like, because if at least one or two people, and there's been more than that, says like, I played Neophyte and I stopped working for this terrible entity I was working for because I was moved by, or just leaves a positive review. This impacted me this way, and I was really thinking about that because there's been some feedback where I'm like, there's a tendency to kind of want to I went off with Dave on some of the modern technological dystopian questions, but like I prefer somebody just like if you're gonna have kind of a weird comment about it, but it's your own feelings about the game. I don't really understand your game because what is a military industrial complex? I don't know what that is, but it kind of made me think about my boss is really treating me well, and I like cyberpunk, but I don't know who's a neuromancer. I don't know what that is. And I played your game, and like it made me kind of think about a lot of things differently. I kind of don't agree with your your politics or whatever. But so even if like, but if it's like someone's authentic reaction to it, even if they don't agree with everything, then like that always makes my day. Because I'm like, that's why I put 2.5 years of blood, sweat, and tears into that thing. Writing music, art. I was like, yeah. People ask me like, what you do of everything. I'm like, it's kind of wild, and I kind of want to do. I was thinking you're talking about this live playing, and I'm like, where Dave said I can't go 2 weeks without getting some feedback and getting that dopamine, serotonin hit. Of like how is this indie dev process? But I'm like, yeah, Dave, I went like 11 years solo. I think I'm doing it wrong, and
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah,
like, yeah.
that's too long.
Yeah. No, so it's like I definitely try to. That's part. I'm trying to do a little more because I do have a tendency. So it's one of my. We were talking about hermit's isolationist tendencies. That's one of my things I can do. I have I got the family around here and we chat, but sometimes creatively I have this I can kind of like go into this kind of cave. I go into like not necessarily Plato's cave. I go into like this creative cave and I don't want to come out like a weird goblin for a long time. And so anyway, but so doing I'm trying to do more of these kind of social events just to as much as possible kind of but I'm obviously hear a lot about what other people are doing. I'm not as in touch with all the I haven't played I got too many unplayed games I need to check out. I know you definitely play a lot and that's that's something I'm trying to work on. Anyways, but we didn't get to talk too much about art. I don't know, we kind of talked a little bit about like painting of plants, but I definitely did want to kind of get on because obviously that's like one of your fortes. Just like when you specifically like graphic design and art, like how did you come to that? Like how was that like journey been, or like how do you approach like creating the art for any of the games? And I know your style's kind of evolved a little bit over time. Or you want to talk about that specifically?
I feel like I don't really have any qualifications or education to do art. I've bought books about art and studied them. I guess for me, the whole point of being creative is there's something in your head and you want to get it out. And for me, that was always quite a visual thing. And the visuals were probably the most important part. So they were probably what I spent the most time working on. Because if it didn't look like what was in my head, it didn't feel like what was in my head. For me, I tend to think art is a great way to help the reader's imagination. I always think the theme of the game should come first. So I'm always worried that art will get in the way of gameplay, which is probably the most important part. Because if you have a game that's not fun to play, it doesn't matter how good the themes are, how good the story is, how good it looks. No one's going to enjoy it. So, yeah, I guess for me, I don't know. I wasn't very good at art when I was a teenager. I failed art in high school. I took art thinking like, oh, I want to be good at drawing, just because I thought drawing would be a nice thing to be good at, and wasn't good at drawing and failed. But it didn't diminish my desire to want to try to draw, so I just kept working outside of art. But I also wasn't a particularly good student. I didn't like drawing the things the teacher wanted me to draw. I wanted to draw my own stuff. And you realize as an artist that works on commission or works on other people's projects, mostly what I do is drawing what people tell me to draw. So that was a fairly early lesson to learn. I was like, oh, I could have been a much better student. I think art is possibly the most mysterious thing to try and analyze. A lot of people can look at code, and to me, that was always the magic of computers. Games always existed very holistically for me as a kid. I didn't see them as segments of art, segments of code, segments of design. I just saw them as an entity, and I couldn't see all the different pieces that make it up. And then the modding scene came along in the late 90s, and I was like, oh, you can change the sprites in Civilization 2 if you edit this file. Oh, I can make a game. I can do that. So, yeah, that was probably my first foot in the door. when it came to being a game developer. So it was the most interesting for me. And I used to draw like little scenes like, oh, that part was probably easier to get into than making things walk around. I have no, I failed art, but I had no training whatsoever in writing code. So it was, me trying to figure out HTML as a high school student and trying to figure out basic on my calculator and that sort of stuff. So I guess that's what I gravitated towards. And then when I was trying to find some way of making money from games, I thought, oh, art is probably the thing I can get people to hire me to do. So that's why. Um, I would say now the barrier for entry to art is low enough that most people who have access to the internet could jump on YouTube, download Blender or Critter, one of these great free programs. I'm sure GIMP is now a great program. I don't use it anymore, but there's lots of accessible programs as long as you have an internet connection. I realize having a computer and an internet connection is definitely a luxury, but a lot of people who at least have those but don't have any way of affording university education, which was true of me, can at least jump in and learn how modeling works, learn how color theory works just from the resources. You have to watch some YouTube ads and feed the corporation its money, but that's how it goes. That's the price you got to pay for free access. But yeah, it's we live at such a wonderful point in history where textbooks that are very expensive might not be necessary to learn what you want to do. So yeah, that was my foray into art, and just talking to people, finding an artist I admired and annoying them until they told me their secrets. It
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, um, hanging around forums with people drawing stuff that was like I want to draw, and be like, oh, what are they doing that I'm not drawing? No different to old master painters from 100 or more years ago would go to the gallery and make copies of the artists they admired. It's the same thing. We stand on the shoulders of giants in order to see further. So yeah, not that I believe I see further. I make 2D point and click adventure games in 2026. I'm not seeing further than anybody, but I'm making the visions in my head come true, and the facilities that I needed to do that was learned just by studying on my own time. I feel like now, if I went to university, I would probably have a great time and be able to engage with professors in an intellectual way and um, bring focus to the work that I didn't have as a teenager. As a teenager, I wanted to ride my skateboard with my friends and play guitar and play Baldur's Gate. So, so those things haven't gone away. I don't skateboard anymore because if I injure myself, I can't play guitar and I can't draw. So you have to give some things away when you get into your 30s. But yeah, I think a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people, but I think the people that know me for my art, but I don't really have many qualifications for art. I just do what I feel is right. Um, and if you read my blog, I've spent a lot of time studying old adventure game art and trying to figure out what makes them look bad, what makes them look good, and the rest of it is just practice. It's just repetitions. So it's just how many scenes have you painted in your life? The more you paint, the better you'll get. It's no different to playing guitar. If you're trying to learn a part, slow the metronome down, play it until you can play it well, and just keep going. And eventually, you'll be able to play the part within reason. So yeah, I can't play. You mentioned Michelangelo Badio, or I can't play like him. I'm not a shredder. I can. If you tell me to take a solo, I can play some fast pentatonic stuff like every guitarist in their 30s. But yeah, I, I, I believe that largely most of the skills you can learn, or the most of the skills you will need to make the ideas in your head will probably come from fairly simple resources. I worry about the state of the internet and whether that will always be true. Um, I feel so fortunate. I wouldn't be here doing this. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Technobabylon would have been made with some other artist if it wasn't for the internet, because there's no way any of this happens without the internet. So I feel so fortunate to have grown up at a time when that was an accessible thing. I hope that it's true for other kids and like today, and they don't get distracted by the TikToks, and they don't get distracted by Fortnite and all the things that I would probably be distracted by now if I was 18 years old trying to make my first game. So, you know, it's we're the product of our own environment, but there will also be other things, other doorways opening up to the kids of today that we never had. So you can't limit too much. Getting a game on Steam used to be literally impossible. Literally couldn't even consider it. So times change.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good chunk of the Dave talk was like all the fun hoops you had to jump through over the years to
Yeah.
get on Steam, and now it's like $100. There you go. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, that's yeah, it's definitely yeah. There's a lot of pros and cons in the 2020s. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned kind of like I just I was thinking about like guitar, getting your figuring out your licks, getting your pentatonic scales. And there's something I realized there's something the kind of mental the mind space, like the zone that you're in when you're trying to figure out like how to play a song, especially like more complex like alt rock metal, especially metal. How does this chords work? Like how do I play? Where are my fingers going? And then like trying to is similar to the button mashing or the eye hand coordination when you're playing like a Mario, or you're trying to how do I get my character to defeat this difficult Fallout creature, and it's similar to also like the skills that you need to when you're talking about art, graphic design, like how do I make this character look like they're walking, like something is wrong, and their head needs to bow a little bit, that helps, right? These little things that you're learning, and just like painting. And I remember I do find it's kind of like there's a similar kind of and there's some people that like they just kind of like I don't know, I don't want to say like they just don't like work, but you kind of do gotta just put the time into, right, the
Unfortunately, it's
yeah.
work. It's a job. Unfortunately, it's a job. And you have to sit at the desk or sit at the guitar practice stool, and you have to do it a long time in order to become good at it. That's how it is. But I also think that there's a particular kind of addictive magic to it. I still remember the feeling of playing my very first E major chord on guitar and making music, the sound of music coming out of this instrument and going, oh, I made music. I did that. I still remember my first walk cycle and seeing the character like walk around in AGS and be like, oh, I made a game. I've made a game. It wasn't much of a game. It wasn't much of a song, but there's this kind of addiction. Like I made this thing happen. I want to keep making this happen. And then, for me, especially learning to write code for Gilt and some of the visual effects that I'm trying to make happen in Adventure Game Studio and some of the gameplay things that I'm trying to do are quite complex for me as a coder. And the way to get through it is no different to if you're playing your shreddy lick on guitar. Is at first you literally can't see how a human being could do this, how it can work. And you just keep working it. And it's like writing code, Some of the maths that I've had to do to make my ideas come to work in Gilt. And I showed some of the stuff off the other day, visual effects, and people like, how did you make that work? I'm like, it's just maths and time spent just you know slowly figuring things out. Make it do one thing and then make it do another thing. No different to playing a hard song guitar where you figure it out. Oh, this is how my hand goes. This is the tuning I have to use. Eventually, you just now I can normalize a vector without thinking about it. Now I can play a diminished chord without thinking about it. But at one point, playing a diminished chord was so alien to my hands. I'm like, this is never gonna happen. I just that combination of where those fingers go just feels so wrong. Um, and eventually you just it's just another walk cycle. It's just another reaching backwards animation. The amount of reaching and picking up animations I've done in my life. The amount. So yeah, it. And I always like seeing a master craftsman doing what they do. You see somebody sharpening a knife where they can, or somebody cutting food up in a really skilled way. Somebody reversing a truck and trailer into a tight spot is great. So of course, you look at lately I've been looking at a lot of the 90s arcade games, and you look at those sprites and graphics and like, they had a team of 15 people doing the graphics for this 2D side scroller game. Of course, it looks amazing. It was the big budget video game title of that year. So yeah, it's nice to look at the master craftsman and be like, oh, I could aspire to that. That's my Ingve Malmsteen of guitar is that person with that art, the Capcom artist that drew that sprite.
Yeah. That's the. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that, but I was like glad you knew that. That was the one I was reaching for. I was like King Diamond. And what was the other one? Not my Guitar Hero. That's a video game. My guitar teacher was obsessed with. It was like Ingve J Malmsteen is okay. Here's your whole okay. It would be like this. It'd be like this like audio salad is amazing, blazing fast. Some kind of like just lick. Just it was like 60,000 notes in like 3 seconds, and then it'd be like, okay, now you do it. And I was like, I have no idea what you just did. You slow it down like half time, and I still have no idea what it just and it was kind of like that was kind of like okay if you know mentioning master craftsman, and it's like you are like whatever this entity is, possibly summoned, possibly like demonically summoned, I don't know. Well, whatever this entity, this person is a master of what they're doing. I have to. It was kind of. I played a lot of games, and I was like, I have to figure out how this music works. And I'm also gonna go shop at Hot Topic and figure out where they got. Like I was like, because if I look like that, then I think it was kind of funny because like it was actually interesting was this kind of like some people Hollywood was telling me some people like say, oh, you were that guy that you led that band. Apparently I was cool. I had no idea. This is one of these weird like lack of social cues. You were that person that was really popular in high school, and everyone was joining your band so they could like get dates and stuff. And I was like, I have no idea what any of you were talking about. I was just trying to figure out cool music. I was trying to like play songs better, and part of it, I was just like not good at picking up my social cues. But anyway, so yeah, getting back to that, I just I definitely that definitely resonates. And I'm glad that you mentioned kind of like a lot of those like 80s games, which those are my nostalgia. I'll come back, and if I need to relax, I'll just play one of those 80s those platformers. It's amazing that they could do, especially with the technology, and if you fit all of that in like a few megabytes, that's a whole art in itself, right? Fitting a game in that tiny little space. Now you got like these 10, 20, 200 gigabyte game, and it's I feel a little bit bad. I think Nephew 2 was like 8.5, 9. It's close to Hollow Knight Silk Song, so I don't feel too bad. But it's like there's an art to the kind of like getting all your assets, getting everything down into that tiny little space. That also I think like the what is it the necessity, the mother of invention, is like the kind of like having to get everything to fit in that small space, kind of lent to a certain kind of creativity that is not as common. I feel like nowadays. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like optimization is always interesting. It's very much like the nerdiest part you can do of a thing, whether it's video games or guitar. Like a lot of, if you talk about like fast playing, a lot of fast playing is just economy and optimization of motion. If you think about sweep picking or tapping or any of that stuff, it's really very boring optimization of like, oh, the pick needs to go down here, up here, or it needs to go down twice here. It's not cool at all. And a lot of like, you might think, oh, rock and roll is really cool, but a lot of the times the way that they develop the thing that sounds like, oh, that's a really cool sounding thing, was just a guy who was really interested in the process and the economics of how can I pick this better. I spent a lot of time, too much time probably, being like, oh, what's the best way to pick this that it's optimized? And so I think like if you're that sort of person that's detail focused and likes to get into the weeds on that sort of stuff, you'll find your specific thing. For example, my brother's really into cars, but old cars, and he spends so much of his life thinking about the optimization of airflow for these really old engines to like make them even more powerful. Then I'm like, just buy a car. It doesn't matter. But that's the thing that you get nerdy about, and like people will bring him their project cars, and he'll be like, oh, I can make this work better for you. There's no different to I had a friend release a game recently that wasn't performing well, and they had to bring someone in to optimize it. And you still have people that have to optimize stuff. If you look at the most extreme cases, the cutting edge of games now, they're still optimizing a crazy amount because you want to have 200 people, all fully detailed, all with really high textures, all reactive, all at once in the same place. That takes extreme optimization. So it's still there. I think in the worlds you and I are working in, we don't need to have that optimization. A lot of the times, like to have a hit song, you don't need to be able to play like Ingvar Malmsteen. Or to have a song that connects with people, you don't need to have those incredible picking mechanics if they're not the things that facilitate the idea you have in your head. If they are the things that you need to do to facilitate the ideas that you have in your head, then you will learn them. If not, you won't. And if you go out now and you play just Ingvar Malmsteen licks all night long, you lose the crowd pretty quickly, I would say, unless it's a very specific crowd. Not many people want that for their 21st birthday or their wedding or a night out at a bar. That's not what most people want. And even me, if I went out and heard 3 hours of fretting, I would probably be interested for the first 5 minutes, and then be like, "Oh, come on, dude! Like, give me something I can dance to, something I can sing along to, right?" So yeah, I think like it makes sense to focus on the things that bring your ideas to life. And just like in the era of the arcade machines, you had these cutting edge 2D things that were incredible. You had Infocom that were writing text adventures that were also very good. I played Plundered Hearts last year and had a wonderful time with it. Really good game, really fantastic time. And there's no cutting edge graphics or technology in that game, even for the era. It was just a well-made game within known systems that didn't diminish it being a good game. So yeah, I think the cutting edge will always be there. There'll always be somebody pushing that edge, and that's just part of human inquisitivity. Is that a word? I don't know, but yeah, I think you find your niche, and for a lot of us, it's not the cutting edge. A lot of us, you know, people people still write books, and books still might be the best experience you have all year in terms of a piece of media. And there's the cutting edge for books has kind of been set for a long time. That doesn't make them any less impactful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not necessarily just like the fastest or the most optimized or how many 1 million polygon characters can you have on the screen, but it's also like does this connect to people? And also it's like that's another thing I've been thinking about is like because you like what you're optimizing or economizing for, right, is the whole thing. Like, are you just trying to maximize the total number of Steam wish lists and sales that you're trying to get and maximize the dollar of your stonk appreciation? Are you maximizing how many? Because I see like I'm not to name names, but there's some people that come to the industry and it seems like they have this maybe they graduated from business school and they just kind of, I always like games, maybe I'll apply that to the game world, the indie game world, or and it's like this particular kind of simulator, visual novel simulator has X amount of stats, and just trying to like stats max. Like this is the perfect game that will sell the maximum number of copies according to like 100 hours of my research that I've done. And I mean, like if people want to do that, I'm not saying that like there's like no benefit to that, because we said we do want people to experience and play our games. But for me personally, I feel like optimizing for like not everybody is going to be able to play Neophyte. It's something that like it asks a certain amount in adventure games in general, and like story heavy games in general. It's going to ask you to do a certain amount of like reading and thinking of a certain kind. Some people are like, what, I just want to like run around and shoot stuff. I don't really want to do that. And like those people are not going to, right? Or I just want to platform right now. And sometimes I just want to play Tetris, or I just want to play Mario. And and some people like I never really want to play that kind of game, or sometimes I do. And so like and so it's kind of like trying to find like what kind of game that's for me, and for I think a lot of specifically indie creators, what kind of game can I make that I don't think really anyone else can make. We talked about that, like how our unique life experiences and history like kind of resonate in our creations, and just trying to be like, okay, how can I make a game that is the most Silver Spook game, that's and also that I don't want to be super esoteric and just inaccessible, I don't want to just be doing like the game equivalent of like infinite Michelangelo Badio solos, so that nobody can even penetrate it or something. But I also kind of want to make sure that it's something that I care about, and I think that a lot of creators want to make something that they want to say that they have fun making. If you're not having fun making it, it's like I hate to see young people that like I have to make this kind of specific like simulator or this specific kind of game because that's what's going to sell, and I don't really like it, but I'm going to make it anyway because the business and like that. I mean, it's just like that's I'm not saying everyone's doing that. I'm just saying like that. That's something that I see. I would like, because we also have two younger ones here, and like we teach. I teach them. I'm trying to pass these skills on. We mentioned getting older. I cannot be doing like X solos. I cannot do. I cannot do eruption. My fingers are rusting. I need WD-40 and olive oil to get them to function nowadays. So anyway, so it's like, so I want the skills to kind of pass forward through time, and like they don't. I'm like, you don't have to make Neofeud 4 when I'm done with 3. You don't have to like just do exactly what we're doing, but you want to make trying to encourage them to like find out what what you can do, what you like doing, what you have fun doing, and like don't just you cannot completely deny the business reality, but also like
Sure.
you gotta balance it. You gotta balance it. Yeah.
I think for me, everybody has a different set of beliefs. My own personal belief is that you only get one chance at this life, but this is all you get. If you don't enjoy the life that you have, and if it's because of your own choices, some people have unenjoyable lives through no choice of their own. But in the case of you and I, where we're getting to choose what we make and we're getting to choose the people, that we work with and talk to, and the sort of project that we work on, if you're making something that you don't like making, then that's part of your life that you don't get back. It's done. So it's kind of a tragedy to think if somebody's grinding away at a project that they don't enjoy but believes will be their key to success. If success to you counts as some sort of nebulous accomplishment, fine. I can't change that. To me, success is having a rich life, and that's all it is. So for me, success is today I'm working on a project that I believe in. Today I'm working on a project that I love working on. That's the success. I can't ask for more than that. If people play it and like it, that's fantastic. If enough people buy it that I get to make another one, that's fantastic. I hope that happens. But if not, I won't feel like, oh, I wasted my time making Gilt because I didn't enjoy making it, and now I can't make the game that I really want to make. That would be the true tragedy for me. If nobody buys Gilt, if the game industry collapses tomorrow and I don't get to finish Gilt, or whatever happens, I can still say that I've enjoyed the time making it. I would be sad if I don't get to finish it. I would be sad if I never get to make another game after Gilt. But also, it would be sad if I was lying in hospital bed tomorrow dying from some unknown thing and being like, oh man, I wasted my time. I should have done the thing I really wanted to do, instead of, as you said before, like working the corporate job and giving them my life. So to me, that's the whole point. That's if I'm not making the game, if I'm not making the stuff I believe in, what was any of this for? I've wasted my life, and I spent enough of my life. I've wasted enough of my life giving my time to other people on things that I'm like, I'm fairly good doing that for now. I'd rather work on stuff that I believe in personally, because I might be wrong, and people might hate the project I'm making. That happens. It's okay. It's fine. It's okay to be wrong about stuff. We're all wrong about stuff all the time. That's a normal thing. But just don't work on stuff you don't believe in, because you only get one chance.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely 100% agree with that. I was looking at the Gilt artwork while you're talking, and I was like, because we touched on this earlier, how we kind of we worked on cyberpunk, very very urban metro city games, and kind of weirdly, because we're kind of different places where we're from, and wanting to explore kind of different worlds with more nature. And I was just thinking about the 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 some of the art, like the mushrooms, the giant insects, and I was thinking about I just in general the last month I've really been thinking about like what makes we mentioned like Valfaris, like some of the creatures in that I was like really I love that, like almost like a bacterial skeleton dude. I forget what his name is. Like it's like Lord Jelliskel or something, and it was like it's just like it's like the kind of it's like a biological, but also like anthropomorphized. Just like kind of looks like a pirate, and there's all these like really interesting, kind of really specific like science fantasy. Very very heavy metal, very the movie and the imagery. And I was just thinking of like how like and like obviously Gilt like has a lot. I just see a lot of not any one particular franchise, but just like those kind of elements. But it's all it's because there are like cities, right? It's science fictional, but not like in a hard science fictional sense. There is like some elements that are kind of magical. There's forest. There's all kind of creatures. There's a goblin. I think there's one of them is like in Valfara specifically. There's like a goblin. It's like a trash goblin type of entity. And I was just anyway. I if you want to talk specific about like the kind of creature design, like the natural, trying to like how to mesh all that together in a way that like I'm to be honest, I'm really trying to figure out how to do that and make it all work. Because I think of kind of cyberpunk like science fiction, and it's like I'm a little fast and loose, and I'm kind of there's a certain kind of aesthetic. It's a little like Fallout tongue in cheek with the way I do my cyberpunk. But the science fantasy is its own kind of unique thing, and I don't know if you want to talk about like how you're developing the kind of characters, the kind of world, what it looks like, what it feels like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess as a kid, I was always fascinated with bugs. My mum bought me a microscope, and I would look at bugs up close. And if you want to see a freaky thing, look at any part of nature up close. It's crazy out there. But also, I grew up. I'm not sure if you ever played Morrowind, but Morrowind has this great mixing of what you might call straightforward fantasy and then very strange fantasy. There was in the 90s, there was an RPG called Albion where it's a science fiction society, but also you crash land your spaceship on this planet where the technology is plants. So, when people go to the bathroom, that technology is all done via plants, and the plants sort of process the waste, and that was very inspiring to me. And it kind of makes sense because that's how the world works. And you can kind of see an alternative version. And people will call it biopunk and people will call it all these names. But for me, it's more just, I think there's the inquisitive scientist mind that's like, how does the world around you work? And how can we make use of that? I think. And so, yeah, I'm really interested, but I'm also interested. Obviously, Guilt is a decaying world, and I'm interested in what happens, how quickly nature takes back when people go away. If you look at abandoned buildings, how quickly the vines come in. If you look at how quick what were once cities get completely buried by time. I tend to feel like we think of our current situation as fairly static, as like, oh, this big city will always be here. And of course, the people living in Mesopotamia probably thought the same way, right? And now we have some clay tablets left from them. So I feel like it's always interesting to navigate a world that doesn't really care that we're here. That's quite useful to us. We can use wood to build structures. We can use stone to build structures. We can use chemicals that we get out of the ground. We wouldn't be having this conversation without chemicals pulled out of the ground that power our devices without things orbiting the sky. But the things orbiting the sky won't be up there forever. And that interests me. I've been reading the Viraconian books by M. John Harrison, and there's this wonderful moment in the Pastel City where he describes initials written in the sky. That somebody who obviously had a lot of money paid for his initials to be put in the sky, so that when he looks up, one of the constellations is his initials. But that was centuries ago, and nobody remembers who he was anymore. So it's kind of this meaningless grand gesture. And if you look at the pyramids, or you look at that sort of stuff, it's kind of similar. You know, maybe you want to be the first person to go to Mars, or maybe you want to do that. But also, one night I was sitting outside thinking about my game, and I looked up, and a Starlink launch had just gone overhead, and there was this train of satellites going across. It was the most surreal thing I think I'd ever seen at the time, of just this train of satellites like going through the sky. And I thought, I wonder if all of this collapsed, all the technology we have now, the same way that you name an ancient society, ancient Greek civilization collapsed, ancient Roman civilization. Civilizations tend to collapse. They burn themselves out. I wonder if all of this went away and the technology that we have goes away, and we go into what we might think of as a new dark ages, and people look up and see that trail of things going across the sky. I wonder what they would think they were. I wonder if they would have any idea. Or would they create new gods the same way people would look up and see planets and create gods from them? So yeah, I think that is a big part of it for me, is going out and looking at the world and thinking, like, what happens if I look at this outside of my knowledge? Because I know what the satellite is when I look up. I understand what that is. You and I know how this technology works. But if you took your computer back in time with enough battery charge that you should show it to a king, you would be a magician. You'd be a god. You would be some incredible thing. And that's the stuff that's interesting to me, is that, I mean, we come back to Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So, and magic is religion, magic is science. If we go back to Aquinas struggled really greatly with the magic practitioners of the day that were doing obviously bad things, alchemists that were doing unknown things, and then the religious people. If you think about it, in religion, especially Christianity, I can't speak a lot about other religions, so I won't. But in Christianity, you have, you know, phrases that you use, or sacraments that you perform, particular pieces of equipment that you might use, whether it's just, you know, taking communion or anything like that. And then if you look at what the pagans were doing, they had these strange rituals and strange symbols, very much in the same way. And then you had the alchemists that had strange chemicals and strange rituals they would perform to make changes happen to chemicals that were very much like a magic to Aquinas. And he was struggling very much to be like, okay, don't be like the pagans. They're obviously bad because our God's the only God, monotheism. Definitely be like us, even though we do the same things as them, basically, but we're the good ones. And then the alchemists, which is the technology, I'm not sure about them. I don't think they're pagans. So for me, that's the part of science fiction that's really interesting, is outsider knowledge. And that's where gods come into it. What is a god? Define a god. It means different things to different people at different points in history. And it means different things to different people in the world now, depending on cultural upbringing, depending on beliefs. You can very easily see how 2,000 years ago, a volcano erupting might have been an act of God, or that might have been the god itself. So that's why nature inspires me, because we are outsiders a lot of the time to nature. And this has been a very long, rambling answer. I'm very sorry about that, but
it's fine.
But I think if you come at anything from an outsider, you have both a confusion for it and a reverence for it that approaches um, both atheism and spiritualism at the same time. Because you might just walk through nature and see nothing at all in it. But you can also look at nature and see it as some grand miracle of chance or design or whatever you choose to believe personally. Um, is it's kind of a miracle that we're here. The odds of us being here are so small that I can understand how people would believe that were it not for the intervention of some grander power, we wouldn't be here. But I can also understand the people that believe that it's not to do with a higher power whatsoever. It is here just by the way that the universe works, and you can still have reverence for that. I think. I hope.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely kind of see. I obviously I don't. We have a limited amount by necessity of information about guilt, but I definitely like all the philosophical and like spiritual religious dimensions of what is being explored. I mean that definitely fascinates and intrigues me as well.
I
More,
hope people also won't think it's going to be a very dry theological philosophical game because it's not. It's an adventure game. I promise you that there's puzzles and stuff. Like it's not just me rambling on for several hours. I promise.
yeah, it's not just Ben's Bible. No, no, it's like yeah, no, I definitely get.
Ken's Bible. I like that.
Yes. I mean, yeah, we were just kind of we're talking about around here we were discussing because our younger ones hadn't been to they have not endured the Catholic trauma, you know, going into the Catholic school, and you know, missing out on the glorious hellfire experience. No, but it's we're talking about like, yeah, what is this, what goes on in church, what goes on in, you know, these, there's Catholics, there's Protestants, and there's various subsects, and we're discussing, you know, there's, you know, various other, you know, as a other kinds of belief that people have in the world, and there's yeah, because I feel like that idea of like what will people make of nature, what will people make of human created objects, artifacts in the future, right? They might not even recognize that, as you mentioned, the satellites, the line of satellites. What will they call that? What will they describe that as? I mean, just one example here in Hawaii. You know, there's Pele is one of in Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian belief system. We actually live fairly close to a volcano. Actually, we're actually in a lava zone, and so some people.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's very metal actually. As people say, Silverstook, why are you into all this goth and urban and metal? And like, we're like very close to active volcano.
I live near the fire, guys.
Yeah, I mean, like there's literally like black sand beaches, and there's like flaming, exploding rocks shooting in the air. Not right now. We'll be fine. I'm gonna finish this podcast, I promise. But
Okay, that's good.
yeah, but it's people like call us up and be like, "Are you guys okay over there? Like, I heard there's a volcanic eruption. Are you guys like right next? We're close to it, but it's slow moving lava. It's not a stratovolcano. I have to explain I have to explain, like, it's kind of funny because like I'm a you know, like we have we here we learn about, you know, our history, and we try to teach our, you know, Native Hawaiian, try to teach our kids about, you know, our cultural history and our practices, and but we also, you know, we understand, like, you know, this is tephra, this is a ash plume, this is a, you know, it's a shield volcano, it's slow moving lava, you know, but actually, like, a lot of Hawaiians here, we actually understand like how that works, and we don't really, you know, because we've lived here for, you know, centuries, like near, certainly here near this volcano, and you know, it's all it is, you know, the stories are simultaneously science, but they're also, you know, they have a spiritual, religious element to them. But it's kind of like, you need to understand, it's like, you know, Pele is the goddess here, and you need to respect, you know, you have to respect Pele, and you know, if certain people are not being charitable, there's, oh, that's just superstition. But it's really like, if you understand how the processes work, like based upon historic experiences, people died. You know, people did die when they first ventured there, and they didn't understand like when these rumblings are happening, when this smell is in the air. right? And it's told through stories, right? And like there's legends of like Ohia, which is the lover of Pele, and it's a kind of tree that only grows like in these pitch black moonscape lava flows, right? And
Right.
so in one sense, it's the long term lover of the volcano, right? It's the first there. It's always with her, but she repeatedly burns him. It's this weird codependent relationship they have. And or it's these stories that are it's kind of like we have entertainment, like we have video games, we have movies that are entertaining, or like fairy tales, right? They're entertaining, the Disney movies, right? And the mythology and the Marvel modern mythology that we have, is its own kind of entertainment, but it's also it's entertaining, but it's also for our these specific stories of the volcano and the related plants and animals, like the pig. There's the god Kamapua is the pig. It is like a god, and also the natural creature that is the boar, right? And it's always frequently wrestling with this tumultuous love triangle with Pele as well. And but that's just because they're frequently in that area. They're frequently digging up to the earth, right? They're in a
Right.
kind
Right.
of and they're recently disrupting our garden, so we had to kind of deal with those creatures with fencing. But anyway, so long story short, and it's but if you understand like kind of like how some of these stories develop, like they're entertainment, they're spiritual, and some of these like are to instill like we need to take care of the land so it takes care of us, and this is how we do that. We have to respect like these aspects of the natural environment. If we don't, you're going to get severely injured. If you build right there, we're in a location where you might not know it, but it's actually it's pretty well situated. If you build like right up, some people do that don't understand. They'll build right up to where it's erupting, and then you're in a really bad spot, and so if you understand that, then you're not kind of then it helps you to live in this environment that we're on. And these are like
Yeah.
practices that humans have developed over centuries. And anyway, long story short, so I feel like and I was like, how do I infuse that kind of into games in a way, I actually feel like that's a little bit easier because you were talking about like coconut, just throwing coconuts in the game, and White Sand Beach. That's a little bit, people might I just want to see more of that. I do like beach, but I always think I painted some scenes of actually like the lava erupting and like flowing into the ocean, and some of that actually it's not in it's in Neophyte too. It's not necessarily like this is like it's not set in Hawaii, but like it's a scene, but it's actually a painting that I did, and I kind of restructured it, and there's robots in it, and there's cyberpunk elements in it, but and I was trying to infuse like I was dovetailing back to what you were talking about, trying to infuse like the way that and not just Hawaiians, like a lot of peoples around the world think about have thought about nature, have developed different kinds of stories and mythologies. Some of them more kind of destructive, arguably. Like we're talking a little about monotheism
Sure.
and erasure of others, and how like those kind of like really domineering sort of stories that people tell, like religious, scientific, etc., interact with other ones that are more willing to let different more willing to let a plurality of stories exist, I would say. And that's like one of the core conflict that kind of core the way you do civilization, the way you do your narrative that guides your entire society, and the conflicts between those kind of ways is kind of central to like the core of Neophyte 2. And anyway,
Right.
that's my rambly bit. There you go.
But I also feel like a a god, or the concept of a god, or anything you have reverence for, doesn't stop being a god just because someone else doesn't have reverence for it, or because you don't have reverence or awe for something somebody else does. If you can stand at the foot of a volcano as it's erupting and only think about science, then you're a different person to me, I think. I think if you can look at the vastness of space and only think about atoms, that's fine. That's okay. Other people don't. If you can look at you talk about like destructive properties of gods. Gods are always destructive because a lot of the times our stories were ways of explaining things to ourselves. There's a lot of mythologies and religions that have a flood story because how do you explain a flood otherwise? You and I might say, oh, changing weather patterns or anything like that. But historically, people didn't understand climate. People didn't understand that sort of thing. So it's a god. And it's an angry god. We did something wrong. And so, if you look at the Aztec people have a flood myth. Obviously, we have the biblical Noah's Ark, but there's plenty of them. I believe the Assyrians had a flood myth. I'm very sorry to anybody if I get these wrong. I'm not a theologian, but yeah, it's a way of explaining a universe that doesn't care about you to yourself. If you look at the Greek gods, they're kind of awful a lot of the times. Athena's good. She's pretty helpful a lot of the times, but like a lot of the times they were just not nice figures. But also the Old Testament God of the Christian Bible, not a particularly nice guy. And that comes from the same place that the Quran comes from. It comes from the same place as Torah. So like and you have a fairly vindictive sort of God. So I think if you think about our modern world, people have a reverence for wealth and fame that approaches awe and fear the same way that people of times past might have said to feel about gods. And you can devote your life to the god of wealth and fame the same way people might have devoted their life to name a god from anyone. So I think gods are still out there, and a lot of them are just creations of our mind or constructs of the society that we live in. It's just that we are in that system, and so we don't see it. And some of that's human nature. I think there's no person on the planet that if you said to them, "Oh, you can have a little bit of wealth and fame," they go, "Oh, no, thank you." I think everyone has a little bit of ambition for that. Even it's just like if I had that wealth, I could use it to help people that I think need helping. Okay, it's power, and I think everybody can find a use for power at any point in their life. So yeah, I that's how I think about gods. I am fairly suspicious that the game I'm making will be labeled both way too religious for some people and way too blasphemous for some people. I've spent sat up to like 2 o'clock in the morning with religious friends of mine in very deep discussion, doing my best to be very respectful of their beliefs, but also doing my best to like call things out when I can see it. And I always try. I hope people feel like they're welcome with me, no matter what they bring to the game. If you are critical of somebody else's beliefs, just understand that your beliefs, no matter what they are, can be criticized by someone else. So it's a study on that, but also it's a study of like the way I was raised up and what I believed as a child and what I believe now are two different things. And so belief is a changing thing and not a fixed thing. So I feel like I don't know why I made a game with such a hard message to bring across. I should have just made a nice adventure game that anybody can play and enjoy, but it's not how it is. But that's always been the stuff. My favorite thing about like working on Technobabylon is that James brought a wealth of ideas. I was like, oh, this guy isn't making Technobabylon. He's not making a cyberpunk game because he thinks neon lights are cool and trench coats are cool. That's not why he's making it. I remember one of my high school friends, we were all talking about Deus Ex because we had a burnt CD that was being passed around that we were all playing it on because that's what we did as poor kids at the time. And he didn't like the game because he'd started the game, used cheat codes to give himself all the weapons, and he was like, oh, the mechanics are horrible. I don't like this game at all. And I was like, oh, that's... Whereas my other friend and I were seeing if we could complete the first level without using any items whatsoever. No weapons, no skills, nothing. Just, and it's funny because you were talking about the guy at the top of the tower who sort of confronts you about this being this like multi-billion-dollar agent, which is really funny because at the start of the game you're so bad at shooting and running and everything. You're like a weakling. You're
What a
awful.
waste of
But
money.
yeah, it is a waste of money. But yeah, it's one of those things where like some people will get nothing from my game, and I am fully at peace with that. I accept that. I hope that they know that I accept that because there's really popular things that I've got nothing from, and I come to it and I'm like, oh, this isn't for me. It's okay. And sometimes I've expressed those opinions online in a way that I'm like, oh, I should have said that nicely. I didn't. Okay, I was a man in my 20s. Of course, I did it the wrong way. That's what we do. But yeah, my hope is that anybody that plays anything I worked on, whether it be Unavowed or Old Skies, especially I think with Dave, is open to interpretation. We'll see it not necessarily as like, oh, this is what I believe and what you should believe, but oh, this is from the heart of somebody that's living in the same world as you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, to be honest, like obviously the thinking parts, like you said about Deus Ex, and we both kind of discussed that, or kind of the you know it's very dark in Deus Ex. It's a cyberpunk world, but there's revision and it helps to improve it, some of the mods, but it's really like the story and the world and like the kind of questions that it poses. It's constantly posing these questions to you. It's actually Deus Ex is like full of books. I was like, for the cyberpunk world, you have so much dead tree bark. It's so much paper in this world.
It's also like every bartender and homeless person wants to talk to you about politics or philosophy, which is really, it's very cute. I find that so endearing. I wish more games did that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was who was I talking to? I think it was the nameless mod dev that was saying, yeah, this is, you could tell everyone who worked on this game, Deus Ex. The nameless mod is a huge mega Deus Ex mod. And I was talking to him because
Oh, I know the nameless mod.
You know the nameless mod, yeah. So nameless mod,
Yeah, Orcs or Foons, right?
Yeah. Off Topic Productions, they helped. But when I was getting started, because one of my first games was also a Deus Ex Silver Spook game. The first Silver Spook game was also Deus Ex mod, and they were hugely helpful. And they were like, yeah, but they pointed out what you were kind of saying, which is that you could tell these people were politics and philosophy majors that were working on this game, and they're like, I need to use my expensive college education on something, and it's going to go into every bartender and homeless person conversation. And it's great. And
Well, James.
Go ahead.
James did and had to take a break from our work at one point because he was campaigning as a politician, which is like, that's nobody better to be working a cyberpunk game than that, right?
Yeah. I did hear. Yeah, I did hear about that. Shout out to James. I know I talked to no pressure because I know there's health issues, but Technobabylon 2, whenever it comes out. I mean, yeah, he does a great job of like working a lot of that. The best parts of I think his major is also in politics, but working that angle into the games, that's one of the things I really love about Techno. It kind of felt like playing like a 2D cyberpunk adventure version of. I don't want to just say it's a version of Deus Ex because obviously it's a very original world, but I had the same kind of feeling like playing.
Oh no, he and I are both big fans of Deus Ex, and maybe he and I are the two biggest fans of Invisible War in the world. We're the two that get along with it the best because we used to talk about that one a fair bit, and I was like, it's a great game. I understand that people don't like it. I accept all of their criticisms. That doesn't change the experience that I had when I played it and the awe that I felt when playing it. Both of those things can exist at the same time.
What was your favorite part or character in Invisible War? I'm curious.
I mean, the greatest was the coffee shop conspiracy, right? That had to be the best part of that game. It was so much fun.
Pequods?
Yeah, and I also feel like for me, Invisible War was kind of this really holistic thing where there was a lot of systems that maybe didn't connect particularly well, but all of them impressed me at the same time. There was this feeling of my friend came over and we installed the demo, and it didn't run particularly well on my computer because I was a you know, didn't have much money, and but it was running, and we were sneaking around the apartment in the demo, and the shadows were moving in real time, and the walls. There's bump mapping in that game that blew my mind at the time. And then like I bumped into a chair and the thing that was on the chair like bounced off the chair and rolled on the floor. I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Now if you do that today, yeah, it's fine. It whatever. But at that time I was just like, how are they doing this? This is insane. This is nothing has ever been like this. It was very much the act of walking around an apartment was suddenly interesting, which is in a game like a first person shooter or an sim specifically where you do a lot of walking around.
Hmm.
The fact that they managed to make that interesting is the greatest part. It's no different to like playing one of the skate games where most of the time you're just going through a level to get to somewhere to skate, but the fact that you're skating while you're doing it, they made that part the most interesting part. So yeah, and then like you can criticize everything about that game, but at the time I was fairly immune to any criticism of it just because I drank the Kool-Aid. I was sold on it, and that's okay. If I went back and played it now, I wouldn't get past the first loading screen. The loading screens takes so long on PC; it's out of control. Those loading screens are like 7 minutes long.
Yeah, I do remember the loading screen. I remember I'm gonna sit through this because I love Deus Ex, but yeah, it was painful. I think that some of the modern versions of it have repaired that issue a bit.
Okay.
I don't know I don't know if it might be different PCs, but I've gone back and I mean to be honest, like aside from I remember when it came out of that Naughty's era, and it was kind of a I think it was one of those things where kind of a lot of the industry was shifting, and like thought leaders kind of led thoughts in a certain way that and consoles were where things were moving, and I know Warren Spector even kind of commented on some of this, like it was just kind of it didn't work the way when and how it came out and how people reacted to it. It's kind of unfortunate, and it's some optimization that could have really helped it out. The loading time was a big thing,
Sure.
and so I feel like
Yeah.
if people like I feel like if people come back and play it, some of these like quality of life update versions of it, because when I did eventually get to playing it, I mean I did I did like it a lot. I totally get it has the similar feeling of Deus Ex One. In some ways, it's even better, obviously because of the things you just mentioned in the physics and the kind of the way that the how
Kidney Thieves on the soundtrack.
Kidney Days on the soundtrack. I mean, absolutely that was I was like, yeah, I still have that Deus Ex Invisible War Kidney
Don't get
Thieves.
me wrong, Deus Ex One has a fantastic soundtrack. It has a fantastic. I love the music from Deus Ex One. One of the best theme songs of any game ever. But putting Kidney Thieves in the soundtrack of the sequel is the Matrix thing you could do. I was like, oh my god, it's like being in a cyberpunk movie. It's amazing. Loved it. Especially as an alt rock kid, where that was my stuff, right? I was like, same with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, with Lacuna Coil in the soundtrack. I was already listening to that band. Start the game up and like, oh, there's the album cover on the apartment wall. This is oh, I love this. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was right at the right time.
yeah, absolutely. Invisible, yeah, Invisible. Yeah, they started really incorporating. Yeah, you mentioned like we mentioned like Omicron with David Bowie
Yep.
and infusing the games. That was a really neat time. I really kind of definitely
Yep.
nostalgic for that era of all that all the new metal infused cyberpunk and vampire. Either like Matrix Underworld. Everyone was in trench coats, and I still. When I was 20 years old, I was walking around like 95 degrees
In Hawaii?
in a trench coat in Hawaii with I put the trench coat
Oh
on.
man,
That's how hardcore I was.
you must have sweated.
It was a lot of chafing. It was really sweaty in there. So, not every day, not all day, but Holly knows. So it's I got some
Right.
I have some footage of that. That's it's one of those things. Like skateboarding too hard and hurting yourself, and then wearing trench coats because you watch The Matrix 6 times. And then and you just
Oh,
yeah.
I watched The Matrix. When I got The Matrix, a friend lent it to me on DVD because I had a PC. This would have been in 2003. I had a PC that had a DVD player finally, and I think I spent a whole weekend just watching it over and over and over again, and being like, "Oh, this is." There was something about the film where I finally felt like I understood something in a film, or like a film had something to say to me, and I didn't understand many things in the Matrix at that point. But I was just, it was like playing Deus Ex or Planescape Torment, where I think I understand something beyond the surface level for the first time in my life. Um, growing up as a fairly ignorant child who just experienced things in a very superficial way, there was something very addictive and compelling about, I think I understand something about this that's beyond the. I mean, let's be honest, Deus Ex never tries to be subtexty about any of it. It's right there in the text. So, maybe that's what it took to get me to understand it, was put it as far out in the open as possible. But
Yeah, it's definitely right. It's definitely right there in your face. I kind of I kind of always want games to be a little more, but I think it's also kind of a product of that time and those specific people that worked on the game. And I know
yeah,
Warren Spector himself, like Sheldon Picardi was the writer, and Warren Spector kind of had, kind of like, I know we're kind of talking about, you have something you kind of really want to communicate with Gilt, and I know that they definitely I want to make, because remember, Warren Spector was talking about like he had this idea for the troubleshooter, the game that's the main character is going to be the special agent character, and he tried to get it done for like a long time. And I remember it's kind of weird circle, but like Bruce Sterling was another science fiction writer, and also a cyberpunk writer, a friend of William Gibson, like was the dungeon master for Warren Spector's D&D group, right? And so that kind of like, and
yep.
and like that, so that experience of like playing the tabletop RPGs like kind of impacted Warren, and he wanted to kind of make a game. As far as I understand it, if I'm getting it wrong, I'm sorry, but like that kind of like recreated that like cyberpunk tabletop RPG experience in and he wanted like an immersive sim that was like at that time it wasn't really a genre, but like I guess the closest thing might have been Thief, but something that was
System Shock.
yeah, System Shock.
That Ultimate Underworld, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and I guess like that's just not that that's the only game that they ever made that was like definitely something we really wanted to make for a long time. So you mentioned System Shock, and I just had this thought. I think the system, the Showdown is like the lead singer of like this other band. I forget what her name is, but I was thinking about Kidney Thieves and all these iconic rock musicians, and I just and then I thought of Showdown and the voice. I think there's some, and obviously that was also Ion Storm, and I think System Shock and System Shock 2 for sure has that's another one of my favorite games. System Shock 2 and Deus Ex. Probably I played those over and over so many times.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, in all of the people looking at Guilt, nobody ever mentions Anachronox, and Anachronox is kind of like the Iron Storm game that not that time forgot, but I feel like it never got the reception it deserved, and it kind of, if not directly, the reason I started drawing pixel art is that I played that game and I was like, oh, this is incredible, and went out of the game and tried to make my own cool mouse cursor like that game had, and led me down this rabbit hole that I'm still crawling down today. So yeah, that Anachronox is another game with really big ideas, or at least really sideways ideas, let me say. I feel like Tom Hall just came to that project with every idea he'd ever had and be like, I'm putting them all in the game. This might be my last chance, and made that project. I think a lot of people were very miserable working on the games at those times, and it was really game companies these days. The industry is a nightmare at the moment, but companies have HR departments, right? Back then, companies didn't so much have the HR department, so you just had like 40 people sitting in offices, not really sure how to deal with other people, but we got to make this project happen. And sometimes that's why crunch happens. That's why people sleep under their desks, because of no HR department. So I'm not saying things have got better, because the industry is not in a great place, and the industry hasn't been in a great place a lot of the time historically. But I feel like you hear about some of the old stories from back then, you're like, oh, it was really not in a good place. So yeah.
Yeah, I still wish I did have the luxury of being in a John Romero. It was I think it was Indigenous Game Devs panel with John Romero, and I remember talking about I was like John, I wish I was in the I know you're saying. I mean, I wish I was in the Doom office, playing Doom deathmatch with you. And he's like, yeah. I mean, it was a great time. We were a bunch of rock stars. But then it was
Yeah.
it was a bit wild. It was wild west. It was
Yeah.
very early
Sure.
industry. So
Yeah.
yeah, totally. Anyways, it's been a very fun and very interesting and fascinating. A lot to think about. 2 hours, but I feel like I don't want to keep you here forever.
I feel like I've talked more than enough for anybody's interest anyway.
No, it's great. I'm sure everybody, a lot of fascinating things. I'm sure we could talk even more, but I definitely want to kind of just, let you, say anything else that you feel like we haven't got to. Gilt, of course, is the upcoming your game that you're working on. It will be published by Wajidai Games.
That's as soon as we finish this call, I got to get back to making it.
Gotta get back to
the game made for the people.
I gotta make sure that Ben gets this amazing game out, because I'm gonna be, I'm already wishlisted. I want to get it out as soon as possible. I can play it and have a great time. Yeah, but yeah. Anything else you want to talk about at all? Yeah, that we can get to.
I feel like I've said everything. I have a blog if anybody wants to come and read my thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts about making games and about analyzing art. So if you go to ben304.blogspot.com, got lots of thoughts there, and I reply to comments. So if anybody's like, "Hey, you didn't talk about this that I want you to talk about," you can always ask me there. But yeah, I've definitely spoken enough, I think. And I was just to reiterate for people that are interested in the process of making games and thinking it was really hard to get in the industry or anything like that. It has always been hard. For me, at least, personally, it's worth the difficulty. Everything I've ever done is hard. I don't find anything easy. So, like, getting gigs as a musician was also hard. As hard as getting gigs as an artist in games. But if things are easy, I think you lose your passion for them quickly. So don't be afraid of the fact that it's difficult if it's the thing you really want to do, so that you don't get to 50 and you're working in a cubicle and you're like, oh, I really wish I'd made Neo for you. That would have been the thing I want to do, And yeah, you might not be able to change the world, but you can change someone's world. So yeah, it's worth it.
There we go. That's the perfect way to end this this podcast. I never know how to end it, so thank you so much for that.
You're most welcome.
Yeah. Anyway,
like ending a game, right?
Like ending a game. That's the hardest part, is finishing the game or the guitar solo. Don't go on for 2 hours.
Oh no, I can finish a guitar solo. I just turn around and nod at the drummer and we're done. Or start singing again.
There you go. Yeah. But yeah. And yeah, everybody knows where to find me. Silver Spook. Look for Silver Spook. Neofeud 2 is wishlistable on Steam. It's already out on itch and coming soon to Steam. So yeah, look out for that. Yeah, keep on practicing your pixel art and your other art and your guitar solos, and working on your indie games. Awesome. And yeah, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.